homeless woman saved a puppy without knowing it belonged to a millionaire, and he fell deeply in love. Before we begin this story, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? Enjoy the story. Emily was selling candy at a traffic light when she heard the screech of tires. A loud thud, followed by a desperate yelp. She turned quickly and saw a puppy lying on the street, shaking in pain. His little paws were twitching, and his eyes were wide with fear. Without thinking, she ran to him, dropped to her knees in the middle of the road, and picked him up like she was saving something more precious than her own life. "It's okay. I'm here, all right? I'm right here," she whispered, her voice shaky as tears blurred her vision. The puppy's small body trembled like it was made of paper. People stared. Some mumbled something about calling for help, but no one moved. No one did anything. Emily didn't think twice. She held the puppy close to her chest and started running. At the vet clinic, the receptionist gave her a strange look. Her clothes were worn, her hair pulled back in a hurry, the smell of the streets on her. Emily didn't care. She shouted, "He needs help, please." The vet quickly examined him. "His leg is dislocated. We'll need to stabilize it and give him pain medicine. It's serious, but he'll recover." The receptionist brought out a quote. $100, everything included. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she reached deep into her backpack and pulled out a crushed little box, held together with tape. That was where she kept all the money she had saved for months by selling candy at traffic lights. This is all I have," she said, placing the money on the counter with trembling hands. "I'll pay." The receptionist counted it, surprised. "It's exactly the right amount. Do you need a receipt?" Emily gave a tired smile. "If I needed a receipt, I'd have a home." She sat down on a plastic chair and waited. Her stomach hurt from hunger, but she didn't care. At that moment, she knew she had done the right thing. Later, the vet came back holding the puppy. His leg was wrapped and he wore a protective collar around his neck. "He's going to be fine. He just needs rest and care for a few days." "Does he have a name?" she asked, gently petting his nose. There was a tag on his collar. "Bentley, and it has an address, 515 Park Hill Avenue. Emily's chest tightened when she heard that street name. It was far away and expensive. She couldn't imagine anyone actually living in a place like that. Even so, she picked up the puppy and started walking. 515 Park Hill Avenue looked like a palace disguised as a house. Tall gates, perfect gardens, cameras everywhere. Emily felt invisible standing there with her worn-out sneakers and torn backpack. She pressed the intercom. "Yes? Hi, I found a dog. His name is Bentley. He was hit by a car. I took care of him. This address was on his tag." The gate opened. Emily walked in, her heart pounding. A staff member led her down a hallway so bright and white she could barely look at the floor. When the office door opened, she saw him. Tall, serious-looking, wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit, but his eyes looked tired. And when he saw Bentley in her arms, they filled with a mix of relief and emotion. "Bentley?" He stepped forward, his voice choked. "Oh my God, I've been looking for him for days. I thought—" He didn't finish. He carefully took the dog. Bentley whimpered but wagged his tail hard when he recognized his owner. Brian looked at Emily with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Where did you find him?" She told him everything. The street, the accident, the rush to the clinic, the money she spent. "You paid for all of it?" he asked, confused. "I used my savings. Everything I made selling candy on the street." He frowned. "But why? Why would you do that?" "Because no one else did anything, and he was scared. I've been scared too, so I knew how he felt." Brian was silent. Then he stepped away and grabbed an envelope. He held it out to her. "This is for what you spent, and more." Emily didn't even look at it. "I don't want money. I just wanted to make sure he was okay." "Then, where do you live?" She hesitated, then answered with honest simplicity, "In an alley near 8th Avenue. It's safer than it sounds." Brian looked at her like she was a mystery. A girl who saved his dog, spent everything she had, refused money, and lived on the street. Something inside him shifted. "I have a small room in the back of the house. No one uses it. It's simple, but it has a bed, a bathroom, and a lock on the door." He took a breath. "You can stay, at least until Bentley recovers." Emily's eyes widened. "You want me to stay here?" "Just while he's healing. I trust you. And so does he." She looked at Bentley, already sleeping peacefully in Brian's arms, then at the envelope on the table. Her stomach growled, but she tried to hide it. It's a lot. I don't know. You don't have to decide now. Just think about it with care. I just want to give back what you did. Emily pressed her lips together, moved. No one had ever offered her anything like this before. A room, respect, gratitude. She lowered her eyes, struggling with her pride. If I stay, it'll only be for Bentley. Brian nodded. Of course, for Bentley. But deep down, they both knew something more was beginning there. Something neither of them had planned. Emily woke up before sunrise. She still wasn't used to the soft mattress or the silence. The room was warm, the comforter softer than anything she'd ever touched, and still, she woke up with the same feeling as always, the urge to give something back. She got up quietly, tied her hair with an elastic she found in her bag, and went straight to the kitchen. Helen hadn't shown up yet, which meant she had time. No standing around doing nothing, she whispered to herself, determined to be useful. She opened the cabinets and grabbed what she could recognize. Coffee, a thermos, sliced bread, eggs. She turned on the stove, poured water into the coffee maker, and was about to crack the eggs when white smoke started coming from the side of the stove. She frowned. Huh. Suddenly, beep 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 beep, the loud fire alarm blasted through the room. A jet of steam shot from the ceiling. Emily looked up, panicking. No, I didn't even burn anything yet. Bentley ran into the kitchen, barking like it was war. Seconds later, hurried footsteps echoed. Brian appeared in the doorway wearing only a towel around his waist, wet, hair dripping. What did you do? I was just making coffee, Emily shouted, covering her ears. This feels more like a chemical attack than breakfast. I didn't know the stove had a button for the end of the world. You triggered the security system. This house has a very sensitive smoke detector. Too sensitive, don't you think? All I did was heat some water. Brian rushed to a panel on the wall and punched in a code. The alarm stopped. The silence that followed was as sudden as it was awkward. They stared at each other. Bentley barked softly, circling them. Brian sighed. You woke up the whole house. At least no one will miss the coffee. This isn't coffee. This is an international incident. Emily crossed her arms, still tense, but a small smile forming at the corner of her mouth. For someone that rich, you have pretty poor patience. Brian let out a low sound, almost a laugh. And you have a natural gift for disaster. Thanks. I try. Helen showed up right after, muttering complaints. Emily was banned from getting within 2 meters of the stove for the rest of the day. Still, she insisted on helping in other ways. She tidied up the guest room, organized Bentley's toys, and even tried to clean his water bowl, though she spilled half of it on her own foot. Out in the garden, she found Andrew, the driver, sneaking a smoke behind the ivy wall. Hey, you're the hero of the day, he said, with a slight grin. Hero? I think I'm more like the fire alarm villain. Depends how you look at it. Mr. Scott hasn't walked around the house in a towel in years. Helen nearly fainted. Emily laughed out loud, then quickly covered her mouth. I didn't mean to cause all this. I just wanted, I don't know, to be helpful. Here, my dear, no one tries. We just survive, he said, half dramatic, half joking. But it's nice to have someone around who shakes things up. She didn't fully get what he meant, but she liked the sound of it. Later, in the office, Brian called her in with a serious tone. Emily came in a bit nervous, sitting on the edge of the chair like she was afraid of getting it dirty. I've been thinking about our talk this morning, he began, opening a folder on the desk. If this is about the coffee, I swear. No, it's about a formal agreement. She looked at him, cautious. I'm going to hire you, officially, for 2 weeks, to take care of Bentley full-time, with salary, food, and housing included. Emily blinked. All that? For 2 weeks? That's the expected time for his full recovery, and I want everything documented. You'll have the freedom to come and go, but there will be basic rules. Like? No setting off alarms, he replied, deadpan. She laughed. Brian slid the papers across the table. Read it carefully. You can say no if you want. Emily picked up the papers and looked at the lines filled with terms she barely understood. Then she grabbed the pen on the table, but it didn't work. She tapped it twice, blew on it, scribbled on a blank page. This pen is as dry as you are, she muttered. Excuse me? Nothing. Just thinking out loud. She tried again, and finally the pen worked. She signed the contract with the steady hand of someone who knew what they were doing. Even if she wasn't sure about anything, Signed, she said, pushing the paper back. Brian took it, glanced over it quickly and nodded. Welcome officially to the team, miss? Just Emily. All right, just Emily. She raised an eyebrow. Was that a joke? Don't get too excited. Too late. I already feel like part of the family. Careful. Around here, the family's a bit dysfunctional. Better than none, she replied with a small but sincere smile. Brian stayed silent for a few seconds. Then he stood up and offered his hand. Welcome, Emily. She shook his hand, and in that handshake, as formal as it was, something had changed. That evening, Emily was on the living room couch, with Bentley sleeping in her lap. The TV was on, showing one of those cooking shows with grumpy judges, but she wasn't paying attention. It was her second night there, and even though she was comfortable, part of her still couldn't believe it was real. She was wearing a soft bathrobe Helen had lent her, and her hair was tied up loosely. Bentley was breathing deeply and calmly, like he was finally home. Emily smiled and gently stroked behind his ear. Everything felt peaceful, until the front door opened without warning. The heels were the first thing she heard, sharp, firm steps echoing through the entryway. A woman walked into the room like she owned the place. Tall, slim, perfect makeup, and a perfume that filled the space before she even said a word. Emily sat up straighter on the couch, automatically covering her legs with the robe. The woman looked at her with disguised disdain. Then she looked at Bentley. Well, at least someone here still has good taste, she said, completely ignoring Emily as she bent down to touch the dog. To Emily's surprise, Bentley let out a low growl. What's that, sweetheart? The woman stood up, as if the dog had insulted her. You forgot me that easily? That's when Brian appeared. Natalie? Good evening, she replied, forcing a smile. You weren't picking up, so I thought I'd stop by. Figured we could talk, but I see you're busy. Brian glanced at Emily, then back at Natalie. This is a house, not a runway. You can't just barge in. Barge in? Please. I still know the door code, and your assistant never blocked me from the calendar. You know me, Brian. I never cared much for small rules. She crossed her arms, and only then did she look back at Emily from head to toe. What an interesting figure. You've always had a thing for charity, haven't you? Always picking up lost causes. Emily didn't know what to say. The comment hit like a slap, but Brian didn't hesitate. Watch what you say. Am I wrong? You are. Completely. Natalie laughed, flipping her hair to the side. No need to pretend. It's obvious this is temporary, just like all the others. But if this is your way of getting back at me, congratulations. You did it. This isn't about getting back at you. You don't belong here anymore, Natalie. Emily carefully stood up, picking Bentley up in her arms. She wanted to leave the room, disappear, vanish. But before she could, Natalie took another step. You're really going to trade me for this? She gestured toward Emily. Some random girl wearing your robe? Emily swallowed hard. Brian, without looking away, replied. She means more than any of your appearances in recent years. Silence. Natalie stood there for a few seconds, like she was looking for something to say. Then, she forced a smile. This isn't over. She turned and left, the sound of her heels fading down the hallway. Later, the house was quiet. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, still in the robe, holding Bentley, who was fast asleep and unaware of anything. Natalie's words echoed in her head. Lost cause. This is temporary, some random girl. She knew the woman was just trying to hurt her, but it was hard not to let it sink in. She got up and headed to the door, planning to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. Walking through the hallway, she stopped when she heard a voice coming from the office. The door was slightly open. You always do this, Natalie. Always. It was Brian. He was on the phone. No, this isn't jealousy. You had your chance, and you threw it away over a stupid betrayal. Emily froze. I really tried to move on. I did. But you didn't let me. You'd show up at my house, my events, in my life, like I was something you owned. Silence on the other end of the line. Then Brian continued. You know why this still gets to me? Because you lied to me. And I blamed myself for a long time, thinking it was my fault. Maybe I still do. Emily took a step back, but the floor creaked under her feet. The door suddenly opened. Brian saw her standing in the hallway, eyes wide. Were you listening? She didn't know what to say. His expression changed. Were you spying on me? Emily tried to explain, but he was already walking toward her. You had no right. That was a private conversation. The door was open, I didn't, her voice broke. Great, one more person digging through my life. Emily felt her face burn. She pressed her lips together, held Bentley tighter, and turned around. Maybe it was a mistake to stay here. Maybe it was, he said sharply. Emily went back to the room, her heart pounding. It had been a sudden impulse, but she knew that even if she tried to stay distant, she was already involved. And now, maybe she had gone too far. She threw her robe on the bed, grabbed her backpack, and started packing her things. She was leaving. It was the right thing to do. Before things got worse, Bentley started barking when he saw the backpack being closed. Emily knelt beside him. Hey, it's okay, all right? I just need to go. Bentley barked louder. He laid his paws on the zipper like he was saying don't. She tried to move him away, but he just curled up next to the bag with sad eyes. Oh, don't do this. The barking went on, sharp, honest, like he knew exactly what was happening. Emily took a deep breath and sat down again. Come on, buddy. She gently ran her hand through his fur, and the dog nestled in her lap. And there, in the dark room, with her heart aching, she realized that leaving wasn't as simple as it seemed. The silence of the early morning felt heavier than ever. Emily sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, eyes fixed on the wooden floor. Bentley slept in a corner, curled up, but the soft barks that slipped out in his dreams sounded like small pleas for her to stay. She stood up slowly, trying not to make noise. Picked up her backpack, checked if her few clothes were still inside, her crumpled papers, and the small box where she used to keep money that no longer existed. Before leaving, she looked for a blank sheet of paper. She found an old planner in the nightstand and tore out one of the last pages. With a shaky hand, she wrote, "Thank you for everything, and I'm sorry for listening too much." She folded the paper in four, placed it on the desk, and took one last look at the room, at the blanket folded with care, at the lamp that now looked like a faded star. Bentley, as if he sensed something, opened his eyes and let out a soft bark. "Shh," Emily whispered, kneeling down. "You're going to be okay. He'll take care of you." She kissed the dog's head and stood up slowly. Her body ached, her heart even more. She walked to the door, took a deep breath, and left. The sun hadn't come up yet when Brian woke up. He had slept badly, like on those nights when the mind doesn't quiet down and the chest feels heavy. He decided to check if Bentley had taken his medication, but when he passed by the guest room, the door was half open. He pushed it. The bed was empty. The robe was hanging on the chair. A strange silence filled the room. He frowned and took 2 steps inside. That's when he saw the note. He picked up the paper with his fingertips, as if touching it might burn him. "Thank you for everything, and I'm sorry for listening too much." The words hit like a punch. He crumpled the note, stepped back, and without thinking, slammed the bedroom door shut. The sound echoed through the house. Bentley barked downstairs. Helen appeared in the hallway, sleepy but serious. "Something wrong?" "She left." Helen raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, left?" Brian didn't answer. He just went downstairs, ignoring the coffee, the planner, the messages on his phone. Nothing seemed to matter at that moment. He sat in the office chair, staring at nothing for a few minutes, then suddenly stood up and called Andrew. "I want you to find Emily. Now." "Any specific place to start?" the driver asked, already starting the car. Brian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "She said she used to sleep near 8th Avenue, near a laundromat. See if you can find anything." "On my way." The city was just waking up when Emily curled up by the cold wall of the laundromat. She had returned to the same place where she had spent so many nights. The dirty sidewalk, the old blanket a kind lady gave her weeks ago, the distant sound of cars. It was all familiar. But this time, it was different. This time, it hurt. She coughed. Her whole body felt heavier, and a chill ran down her back. It must have been just the cold. Or maybe not. She knew something wasn't right. She hugged her backpack to her chest and tried to close her eyes. Hours later, Andrew parked nearby and quickly got out of the car. He looked around, crossed the street, and then saw her. Emily was there, lying against the wall, trembling, her face pale. She didn't look like she was sleeping. She looked like she was fading. "Hey!" Andrew rushed over and knelt beside her. "Emily?" She opened her eyes with effort, tried to smile. "Andrew, hi. You've got a fever. Come on, let's get out of here." "No, it's okay. wanted to sleep a little. No sleeping, he said, already pulling out his phone. Stay awake. Brian's on his way. He shouldn't have. He asked me to find you, and there's no way I was leaving you here like this. Brian arrived a few minutes later. The moment he saw Emily, it felt like his heart tightened. She looked nothing like the girl who used to take care of Bentley on the couch. Pale, weak, like she had shrunk. He didn't hesitate. He knelt beside her, slipped one arm behind her back and the other under her knees. I can walk, she whispered. Be quiet, Emily. She gave a faint smile. You haven't changed. Neither have you. Still stubborn. He lifted her up and carried her to the car. Andrew opened the back door, and Brian got in with her, settling her gently. On the way back, Emily rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes heavy. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have listened, she murmured. Forget it. It was my fault. You were angry. I was. Because I was frustrated, and when I get frustrated, I mess up, like letting you walk out the door without stopping you. She sighed, almost falling asleep right there. Brian squeezed her hand firmly. Don't ever do this again, okay? She didn't answer. She was already asleep. Helen was at the door when they arrived. The guest room's ready, she said dryly. She's going to mine. Helen's eyes widened. What? You heard me. Get the room ready and bring the thermometer. Helen paused for a moment, like she was trying to understand what world she had just stepped into. Then she nodded and went inside. Brian carried Emily upstairs, walked down the hallway, and gently laid her on his bed. He pulled the blanket over her, brushed her hair off her forehead, and left to get a damp cloth. When he returned, Helen was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. Never thought I'd see this again. See what? The old Brian, the one before the coldness, the one who cared. Brian gently wiped Emily's forehead, ignoring the comment. She saved Bentley. Yes, and now it looks like she's saving you too. He didn't respond. He looked at Emily's calm face and knew right then that something inside him had already changed. Maybe it started with the dog. Maybe with the way she refused the money. Maybe with her smile, even while carrying the weight of the world. The fever was gone, but Emily still felt weak, like a strong breeze could knock her down. Still, when she opened her eyes that morning and saw the soft light coming through the window, she had a childlike urge to go outside and breathe some fresh air. She sat up slowly, still in bed, and looked around. She was in Brian's room. Clean sheets, a light scent of tea on the nightstand, and a folded blanket at the foot of the bed made it all feel even more surreal. It wasn't the kind of place she pictured herself. And yet she was there. Bentley, as if sensing she was awake, gently jumped onto the bed and rested his head on her lap, with a calm look in his eyes. She stroked behind his ear and whispered, I know. I don't understand what's going on either. A little while later, Helen walked in with a plate of fruit and a distant tone in her voice. Good morning. You look human again. Emily gave a small smile. Not sure if that's a compliment. That's the closest you'll get from me, Helen replied, walking out. Brian came in right after, looking tired, like he hadn't slept much, if at all. You look better. Still a bit weak, but alive. That's enough, he said, walking over to the bed. If you feel like stepping out for some fresh air, I can ask Andrew to go with you. Emily shook her head. I need to walk by myself, just for a little bit, can I? He hesitated for 2 seconds before answering. Take Bentley with you, and your phone. Call me if anything happens. She nodded, surprised to see a hint of concern in his eyes. The neighborhood streets were quiet that late morning. Emily walked slowly with Bentley by her side, the leash loose in her hand and a light coat over her shoulders. The cool air brushed her face, bringing a sense of freedom, but also vulnerability. Let's have a little fun with the folks who only read the comments. Type pizza in the comments. Only those who made it this far will get it. Now let's get back to the story. She sat on a bench in the small park, took a deep breath, and closed her eyes for a few seconds. She needed silence, clarity. But fate, as always, seemed to have other plans. Clara? The voice came from behind. Emily froze. Clara Santiago? She opened her eyes slowly, turned her head, and saw an older woman with gray hair, dark sunglasses, and a shopping bag in her hands. I'm sorry, I think you've got the wrong person. No, I don't, the woman said as she stepped closer, emotional. It's me, Maggie. I used to work at your house, in the kitchen. My goodness. After everything that happened, no one knew where you had gone. Emily stood up right away. I'm not that person anymore. You don't understand. I saw everything, Clara. I know it wasn't you. I know it was him." Emily felt like the ground disappeared under her feet for a moment. "Please," she whispered, "don't speak so loud. Not here." Maggie grabbed her hand tightly. "I tried to defend you, but no one wanted to listen. Your father had too much power. He silenced everyone." Emily pulled her hand back, clearly shaken. "I don't want to go through that again." "But you have to. You can't keep running for the rest of your life. You were innocent, Clara." "I am," she replied, her voice low and steady. But that didn't matter. She tugged Bentley's leash and walked away quickly. "Clara, wait. My name is Emily now," she said, turning back briefly, "and I want to forget that old name." Then she kept walking. Brian was in the garden when she got home. He saw her red face, the fast steps. She let Bentley off the leash, who went straight to his usual spot and went inside without saying a word. Brian followed her, sensing something was wrong. "Emily? I just need some time. Did something happen?" She was already going up the stairs, not answering. Later, he went upstairs to talk. He found her sitting on the floor of the bedroom, facing away from the door, hugging her knees. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" "I ran into someone, a woman who recognized me." Her voice was soft and shaky. "She called me by another name, a name I've tried to erase from my life." "What name?" "Clara. Clara Santiago." Brian walked into the room and closed the door gently. "Do you want me to listen?" She nodded. 2 years ago, I was the adopted daughter of a well-known politician, Samuel Santiago. Respected, admired by the media. On the outside, he looked perfect. On the inside, he was controlling. She looked up, her eyes now filled with held-back tears. "He used my name in fake documents. He took money from a charity project we ran together. When it all came out, he blamed me. And since it was him against a 21-year-old girl with no proof, no support, no one believed me." "Not even your mother?" "She stood by him, thought I was trying to ruin the family's reputation, said I was ungrateful, that I was being manipulated by jealousy." She wiped her face, nervous. "I tried to explain, I swear. But everyone had already made up their minds. The media, my friends. I became the opportunistic daughter. I ran away with what I had, changed my name. I started selling sweets at traffic lights to survive." Brian listened in silence, sitting in front of her. He didn't say a word, just listened. "I never told this to anyone. I just wanted to disappear, erase everything." "Why are you telling me now?" "Because, for the first time since all that happened, I feel like I can trust someone, but I was also afraid you'd see me the way they did." Brian took a deep breath. "I don't know who Clara was, but I know Emily, and Emily is incredibly brave." She let out a soft laugh, tears now falling. "Don't say that. I don't feel that way. You saved a hit dog, turned down money, faced my ex-fiancé, faced me, slept on the streets, and you're still kind. If that's not strength, I don't know what is." Emily lowered her head. "I just wanted to live in peace, that's all." "And now?" She looked at him unsure. "Now? I don't know. I don't want to run anymore, but I don't know if I can face it all again." Brian moved closer, sat beside her, and held her hand firmly. "I don't know what's coming next. But if you want, you don't have to face it alone anymore." Emily bit her lip, trying to hold back the tears, but couldn't. She leaned on his shoulder and cried quietly. Brian said nothing, but the way he held her, firm, careful, and unhurried, said everything. Later on, Helen passed through the hallway and saw the door slightly open. She peeked in quietly. Emily was sleeping, curled up on Brian's bedroom couch, and he sat in the armchair, reading a book, but keeping his eyes on her. Helen smiled to herself. "Never thought I'd see this again," she whispered before walking on down the hallway. In the days that followed, Brian noticed that his once carefully planned routine had taken on a different rhythm, lighter, more unpredictable, and all because of her. Emily. She had no idea how much she threw him off balance, and that was exactly what made her so intriguing. He watched her quietly when she thought no one was looking, when she laughed alone at animal videos on the couch, when she sat on the floor to brush Bentley like he was a baby, or when she softly sang songs she didn't even remember the words to. Her simplicity disarmed him. No games, no masks, just Emily. And he was beginning to wonder how someone so real had gone unnoticed for so long. On Friday morning, she walked into the kitchen in a sweatshirt with her hair tied up, rubbing her eyes like a sleepy child. Someone messed with the coffee. Smells like a trap, she said, pointing at the thermos on the counter. Brian, who was reading and drinking coffee, looked up from the paper. I made it myself. No smoke, no alarm. So it's safe? Relatively. She smiled and poured herself a cup. Helen, who was sorting the silverware, shook her head with a dramatic sigh. Is this place a boarding house now? Emily laughed. If it is, just so you know, I'm not doing the dishes. Brian just watched in silence, a cup in his hand and something stronger growing in his chest each day. That afternoon, Emily decided to walk Bentley around the garden. The day was beautiful and she needed a break. She felt strangely at peace there, like that place belonged to her too now. That's when she heard a strange sound coming from the front gate. Cameras. Lots of them. And voices. There she is, she's right there, someone yelled. Emily instinctively stepped back, holding Bentley in her arms. A few seconds later, Helen came running from the side hallway, pale. Emily, quick, get inside. The press found out. What? Someone leaked that you're here. Probably Natalie. Emily froze. She did that? She's toxic and vindictive. Before they could react, the doorbell rang, and behind the glass, a familiar figure. Natalie. And next to her, a man with a microphone and a smile that was way too wide to be genuine. Is Brian home? She shouted. I brought someone very curious to meet your new friend. Emily's face burned. Brian appeared seconds later, walking firmly, expression calm. What's going on? Just a quick interview, nothing invasive. The whole country wants to know who's captured the heart of New York's most private man. I didn't give anyone permission to come in, Brian said firmly. Oh, relax, Brian, Natalie said with a poisonous smile. It's just a light chat, unless you have something to hide. The reporter stepped forward. Mr. Scott, is her name really Emily? Is it true she's living here with you? Is this a new relationship? Emily's knees went weak. It was too much. Brian suddenly paused. He looked at the reporter, then at Emily, and said without hesitation, Yes, we're together. She's my girlfriend. Silence. Emily couldn't breathe. What did you say? She whispered in disbelief. We're together, he repeated, looking straight at the cameras. The flashes went off. Natalie crossed her arms, eyes wide with quiet rage. The reporter continued, So it's official? Can we publish that? Go ahead, Brian replied and shut the door in their faces. Emily stood frozen in the hallway like she'd been hit. Brian turned to her. I had to protect you. Protect me? She yelled. You threw me into a circus. I couldn't let them invade your privacy. I did what I thought was best. Without asking me? There wasn't time. I'm your employee, Brian. You put me in a role I never asked for. What did you want? For them to make up lies? Dig up your past? Emily went silent. You had no right. I just wanted to keep you from getting hurt. Hurt? Now everyone thinks I'm your mistress, your kept woman, your who even knows? She rubbed her face, nervous. I should have left when I had the chance. But you didn't. She stared at him, breathing hard, and now I regret it. He took a step toward her. I only did this because I care. You don't even really know me. I know more than anyone else, and honestly, I don't care what they think. Well, I do, she shouted. Silence. They stared at each other for a few seconds. Emily was shaking, with anger, with nerves, with something she couldn't name. Brian stepped closer. Are you scared, or are you running again? I don't run. Then why not face this? Because. She didn't finish. He held her face gently, and on impulse, kissed her. It was a quick, intense, desperate kiss, no permission, no plan, and yet, they both gave in. For a moment, the world stood still. The voices disappeared, breathing stopped, and all that was left was the touch, the warmth, the inner chaos that could no longer be ignored. But then, they pulled away. Emily took a deep breath, her heart racing. Brian too. Silence. She didn't say a word, just turned away without looking at him and went upstairs. In the hallway, her face still warm, she leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, and whispered, Why? Why did that have to feel so good? She smiled to herself, and walked to the bedroom with the lightest steps she'd taken since she arrived. Emily opened her eyes slowly. She was still lying down, but the world already felt like it was moving. The last few days had been a whirlwind of emotions, and the kiss with Brian, that kiss, kept coming back to her as if it had just happened. She didn't know how to react. The touch, the intensity, the way he pulled her in, it was impulsive, intense, way too real. But it had also been a mistake. A delightful mistake, and a dangerous one. She went downstairs hoping to see him, but breakfast was ready, and Brian was nowhere in sight. "He left early today," Helen said when she noticed her in the kitchen. "He did?" Said he had to take care of urgent matters, with that look like he was avoiding a conversation. Emily drank her coffee in silence. Something inside her was tight. An uncomfortable mix of frustration and expectation. She didn't know how he felt, but she knew what she was starting to feel, and that was exactly what she didn't want. That afternoon, Emily was in the garden with Bentley, throwing a stuffed toy for him to fetch. The dog ran back and forth happily, as if the whole world was that simple. For the first time in days, she smiled genuinely. But the peace was interrupted by hurried steps. Helen appeared on the patio, clearly upset, holding her phone. "We need to talk." "Did something happen?" Helen took a deep breath. "Your name is on the news sites and on social media. Someone leaked pictures of you here, at the house." "What do you mean? Pictures?" Helen handed her the phone. It was a collage of images. Emily feeding Bentley in the garden, getting into Brian's car, coming down from the guest room with a towel over her shoulder. And the headline, "New partner of CEO Brian Scott? Who is the mystery woman living in the mansion?" Emily felt her face go cold. This is real? It is, and it won't stop here. The press is going crazy. And there's more. More? Helen hesitated. Natalie came by. She brought a journalist. They're waiting at the door. Emily stayed quiet for a moment. "Do they know who I am?" "Not yet, but they want to find out." Emily looked at Bentley, then at the phone. Her heart felt like it was pounding in her throat. "And Brian? Does he know?" "He's on his way." Half an hour later, Brian walked through the door, looking tense, his posture stiff. He nodded at Helen and went straight to the office, where Emily was waiting. "Did you see?" "I did. The press is already at the gate." And Natalie brought a tabloid reporter. "I figured she might do something like this. She wants to destroy you, Brian." "I'm not the one she's targeting. It's you." Emily crossed her arms, anxious. "So now what?" Brian took a deep breath. He walked over to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a folder. "We signed this," she frowned. "What is it?" "A contract. For marriage." Emily let out a disbelieving laugh. "Excuse me? I'm serious. You want to marry me?" "A contract marriage, for 3 months." She widened her eyes. "Are you out of your mind? Listen, this isn't a romantic proposal. I'm not saying we're in love or pretending this is forever. It's an agreement. A temporary civil marriage. No crazy demands, just presence, appearance, and legal protection. You want to marry me just to make things look under control? I want to protect you. They're going to keep digging until they find something. And if they learn about your past..." Emily looked away. That hurt more than she wanted to admit. "You're trying to fix this like it's a business issue?" "Because from the media's perspective, that's exactly what it is." She shook her head, trying to organize her thoughts. "And what else does this contract say?" "You'll have your own room, full privacy, no obligations other than a few public appearances with me. You're free to come and go. And of course, a symbolic salary. For your image." Emily looked at him, stunned. "This is insane. I know. It's gonna look even weirder. We just suddenly get married like it's all staged. They'll believe it. It's better if it looks like a sudden decision than letting them make up something worse. And after the 3 months? We get divorced. No scandals. No problems at all." She stayed quiet. Part of her wanted to tear up that contract. But another part knew Brian was right. She had a choice to make, and if there was anyone truly trying to protect her, even in a strange way, it was him. "Did you sign it?" "Yes," Brian said, handing her the folder. She looked at the paper for a long moment, then picked up a pen. "This pen doesn't work. Blow into it. It's a favorite of mine." She blew, scribbled a little in the corner, and signed with a steady hand. "There." Brian reached out his hand. "Welcome to the most unlikely wedding of the year." She shook it, smiling softly. "I just hope it doesn't become the most talked about one." The next morning, the headline was everywhere. "Surprise wedding. Brian Scott confirms marriage to unknown heroine. She saved my dog and my heart." Emily almost dropped her phone when she saw it. "My heart?" She stormed into the office. "Brian, did you give an interview?" "I made a quick statement. You said I saved your heart. Poetic license? This is a contract, not a poem." Brian raised an eyebrow. "Would you rather I said it was just about the dog?" "I'd rather you stop surprising me." That would be impossible. Emily crossed her arms, trying hard not to smile. Helen showed up at the door with a tray. I just saw the news. So, are you two going on a honeymoon? Only if it involves ice cream and a remote control, Emily said dryly. Very romantic, Helen murmured. In the days that followed, things started to shift between them. The contract brought rules, but also a surprising sense of freedom. They laughed more than they should have, argued over who would heat up the food, competed to see who made better popcorn. And at events, like Brian's foundation benefit dinner, the looks they exchanged felt too real to be fake. We're getting good at acting, she said once. Or maybe we're just being ourselves. Emily didn't answer, but she smiled. One rainy night, Emily walked into the living room wrapped in a blanket. Tonight is for a bad movie and pizza. I've decided. And what if I have something more important to do? Then you'll miss the best part of life. You've convinced me. During the movie, she rested her head on his shoulder without thinking. And he didn't move. They stayed like that until the credits rolled. And even after. That night, she fell asleep on the couch without meaning to. Brian gently covered her with the blanket, watching her peaceful face like it was the only thing he wanted to remember. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of rain. Brian was on the porch, standing with 2 mugs of coffee. When she walked over, he handed her one. Sleep well? Surprisingly, yes. Good. We have a long day ahead. Why? We're doing our first official interview as a couple. What? Don't worry. I wrote a script. You just have to smile and agree. You scare me sometimes, and you undo me. She didn't expect him to say that. She stood still for a moment, looking at him. The coffee warmed her hands, but what warmed her heart was the way he looked at her. No contract, no plan. Just, hun. Emily stepped closer. What if I start forgetting this is all pretend? Brian looked at her for a long time. Then maybe, it's working better than I thought. She looked away, smiling softly. That wasn't in the contract. I can write an amendment. Emily took a sip of coffee. And what would it say? That maybe 3 months isn't enough to figure this all out. She stayed quiet for a moment, then gently touched his hand. The official interview took place on a cloudy afternoon in the mansion's garden. A carefully arranged setting with just a few pre-approved questions, a journalist who smiled a little too much to be real, and a camera trying to capture the authenticity of the couple of the moment. Emily was nervous. Brian, as usual, seemed in control. But she knew better. She had learned to spot when he pressed his fingers into his leg, when he swallowed hard before answering, and when he blinked more than usual. The image was calm, but the man behind it was something else. So how did you two meet? The journalist asked in a friendly, almost fatherly tone. Emily and Brian looked at each other. She answered first. I saved his dog, and I think in a way, he saved me too. Brian looked at her a second longer than he needed to, then added, Life has a funny way of working. Sometimes it brings 2 opposites together to show that no one has to be whole to deserve company. His answer felt more honest than anyone expected. Even the journalist stayed silent for a few moments. After the interview, Emily went straight to her room. She wanted to get away from the cameras, the makeup, the rehearsed words she used to hide what she was really feeling. She no longer knew what was real and what was just acting. She only knew one thing. Being around Brian was becoming dangerous and addictive. An hour later, he knocked on the door. May I? You're already in, she replied, lying on her back, still wearing the dress from the interview. Brian sat in the armchair. You were amazing downstairs. I was a fraud. No, you weren't. It was all just acting, Brian. What you said was real. Emily looked him in the eyes. And what about what you said? Silence. I didn't lie, he finally said, but I didn't say everything either. Then say it now. Brian took a deep breath. He looked down, then slowly lifted his eyes. You know my name. You know I'm the CEO of a billion-dollar company. You know I live here, but you don't know why I'm like this. Cold? Controlled. Reserved? Lonely. I noticed, she said with a slight smile. When I was 12, my mother died. Cancer. Fast, aggressive, devastating. My father never handled it well. He was a businessman, focused, strict, and when she died, he taught me one lesson. Weakness is an opportunity for others to destroy you. Emily slowly sat up on the bed, listening closely to every word. I was trained never to show emotion, to be the best, the fastest, the strongest. There was no room for pain, for doubt, for failure, and that took me far in business. But it pushed everything else away. Friends, relationships, real people. Even Bentley was my therapist's idea, an empathy exercise, she called it. Emily smiled gently. Did it work? It worked until he ran off and got hit by a car, he said with an ironic smile. And then, you showed up. She lowered her eyes. Brian, the truth is you throw me off balance. I don't know what to do with what I feel for you. I don't know how to make sense of it. That's why I get quiet sometimes, or act like a fool. She walked over to him and sat on the arm of the chair. I'm scared too. He looked at her, surprised. You? Scared to believe, to get attached, to think this might be real. Brian leaned his forehead against hers. What if it is? Emily closed her eyes. Then we'll have to learn to live without a script. The next day, Emily found a box at her door. Inside was a photo album, but it wasn't hers, or Brian's. It was his mother's, old photos, some faded, others more recent. Brian as a child, smiling next to a woman with kind eyes. A picnic, a vacation, a birthday with a homemade cake. She turned each page carefully, and at the end there was a note. I've never shown this to anyone, but now I want you to know the person who taught me how to love, before I learned how to hide. B. She held the note to her chest for a while. Then she ran down the stairs. She found Brian in the library, alone, typing something on the computer. Thank you, she said. He looked up. For what? For trusting me. For opening up. I'm still learning, and you're doing well. He smiled. The days that followed felt lighter. Something had changed between them. They no longer talked about the contract. They started acting like it was all real. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They cooked together, talked about TV shows, laughed at Bentley's antics, who now slept right in the middle of their bed like it was nothing. Helen watched everything quietly from a distance. Until one afternoon, while Emily was arranging flowers in the living room, Helen walked over with a thoughtful look. Can I ask you something? Of course. What do you feel for him? Emily was surprised. For Brian? Yes. She held a flower longer than she needed to. Then she answered, I think I got lost in him, but in a good way. Helen nodded. He's different now. Is that good? If it's because of you, it's wonderful. Later, Emily and Brian were invited to a charity event organized by an NGO that helped underprivileged children, one of the few causes Brian truly supported. During the event, Brian gave a short speech, praising the NGO's work and thanking everyone for being there. At the end, he took Emily's hand. And I'd also like to take this moment to thank the woman who's been my foundation these past few months. My wife, Emily. The room filled with applause. Emily blushed. But she didn't let go of his hand. Is this still part of the contract? She whispered. No, this is part of the truth. On the way home, in the car, Emily rested her head on Brian's shoulder. I'm scared of when the 3 months are over. Me too. What if it doesn't work out? What if it does? She smiled, her eyes slowly closing. Then promise me one thing. Anything. You're not going to hide who you are anymore. Not from me, not from yourself. I promise. And you? What? Are you going to let me be real too? Brian squeezed her hand gently. You're the most real thing that's ever happened in my life. The next morning, Helen walked into the living room with a tray and a suspicious look on her face. You two spent a lot of time in the garden yesterday, huh? She casually commented. Good conversation, Emily answered, trying to cover it up. Sure, Helen said with a smile. Just letting you know, Andrew is making bets with the gardener about when you two will fall in love for real. What? Oh, and there's a pool too. I bet on next weekend. Helen, Emily exclaimed, blushing. Don't judge me, dear. It's been years since this house had a good romance story. I'm just having some fun. Emily shook her head but couldn't help but smile. Something told her that maybe even Helen was rooting for that. That night, Emily and Brian decided to take Bentley for a walk around the block. The dog had been restless all day, and they both wanted to clear their minds a little. The breeze was soft, and the sky was clear. They walked side by side in silence when Bentley suddenly pulled on the leash hard. Bentley, calm down, Emily yelled, but it was too late. The dog broke free and ran straight for a side alley. He's going to hurt himself again, she screamed, starting to run after him. Brian ran alongside her without hesitation. Come this way. He's heading for the back. They ran together for a few meters, dodging posts, fences, and parked cars. Emily tripped slightly, but Brian grabbed her arm before she fell. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Keep going." After a few minutes, they found Bentley standing by a trash can, panting but okay. Emily dropped to her knees beside him, hugging the dog tightly. "You're trying to give me a heart attack, aren't you, you rascal?" Brian crouched down beside her. He just wanted a little adrenaline. Next time, he can go by himself. They both laughed, still catching their breath. That's when Brian reached out to help her up. Emily took his hand. But as she stood up, he didn't let go. She looked at him, surprised. Their fingers intertwined, their breath still quick. The touch was firm but gentle, a simple gesture, and yet so full of meaning. The night after their walk with Bentley brought a sudden change in the weather. The sky, which had been clear before, was now covered with dark clouds. The wind was stronger, and the air carried the familiar scent of a storm about to break. Emily woke up feeling uneasy. Everything in the house felt too quiet. Even Helen didn't make her usual comments when bringing breakfast. Andrew, meanwhile, hurried through the halls, speaking softly on the phone. Something was different. Brian appeared only later in the morning, quieter than usual. "The storm's going to get worse in the afternoon," he said, watching the sky from the porch. "Weather or mood?" she joked, trying to ease the tension in the air. He forced a smile but didn't respond. Emily approached slowly. "What happened?" "Natalie." Emily tensed immediately. "What's going on now?" She showed up at the company early this morning with a folder full of old documents, pictures of you on the streets, old reports about your disappearance, and a rehearsed speech to convince investors that you're a fraud. Emily felt her stomach turn. "She wants to ruin you, through me. I know, and what are you going to do?" Brian took a deep breath. "Nothing. If I react, she wins. And if others want to believe her, let them. I'm not fighting for my image anymore, Emily. I'm fighting for something else now." She looked at him, trying to understand. "You know who I am. You know what I've been through. And still," he repeated, firmly, "I choose to stay by your side." Emily felt tears welling up, but she held them back. "It wasn't the time." "Are you sure?" "The only certainty I have is that you're the most real thing that's happened in my life in the past few years." She didn't say anything. But in that moment, she knew that something inside her was changing. Something was healing. In the afternoon, the storm finally arrived. Lightning struck across the sky, and rain poured down heavily. The windows of the mansion vibrated with the sound of thunder. Emily stayed in the library, curled up in a corner, reading one of Brian's old books. Bentley slept at her feet. Brian came in hours later, his shirt wet from being outside. "Are you crazy going out like that?" she asked, putting down the book. "I went to the gate. The press is still there. And now they brought drones. Drones! Welcome to the world of digital chaos." She got up, grabbed a towel, and gently pulled him inside. She started drying his face, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. "I know, but I want to." Brian watched her intently. Her touch was light, but each gesture said more than 1,000 words. "Why are you still here?" he asked suddenly. Emily stopped. "Because I don't want to run away anymore." "Even with all this?" "Even with all this." Silence. She kept drying his hair, her hands slightly trembling. "I'm tired of pretending too," he confessed. "Tired of controlling every step, every word, every feeling. With you, I can just be myself, even when I don't know exactly who I am." Emily smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "And with you, I can stop defending myself." Brian pulled up a chair and made her sit in front of him. He grabbed a blanket and covered her. They sat there in silence, watching the rain fall. "When my mom died," he said, his voice soft, "I promised myself I'd never let anyone get close enough to break me again. I kept that promise for a long time. Until now, until you." Emily bit her lower lip, moved. "I don't know what we are, Brian, or where this is going. Me neither, but I know what I don't want, to lose this." She reached out her hand, and he took it. The storm was still outside, but inside the library there was a truce, a safe space where old wounds were slowly starting to heal. Hours later, Helen appeared at the library door, holding an extra blanket and a look that said she already knew everything that was going on. "You two want to have dinner here, or keep pretending you're not a real couple?" Emily and Brian laughed at the same time. "We'll have dinner here," Emily said, snuggling in closer. Okay, but if I hear a kiss in the middle of the room, I'm going to pretend I'm gone, Helen replied, turning away. That night, Brian surprised Emily with something simple, a letter. She found it on the bed next to a rose. I don't know how to write beautiful things, and maybe I never will. But today, watching you read To the Sound of the Rain, I realized that some people don't come into our lives to complete us. They come to remind us of who we are when we forget. You remind me, Brian. She held the letter against her chest, moved. Then she went downstairs, found Brian on the couch with Bentley on his lap, and just sat down next to him. No questions today, she said, no answers either, just presence. And they stayed like that. The next morning, the storm had passed. The sky cleared, and the air carried the scent of wet earth. Emily opened the window and took a deep breath. Brian was already outside in the garden, watering the plants. Shirtless, completely carefree, she smiled, crossed her arms, and leaned against the window. Trying to provoke me? I'm watering. What about you? I'm admiring the view. He laughed nonstop. The storm's over. Yeah, outside and inside. She went down and joined him. She grabbed the hose and started helping, even though she didn't know anything about gardening. Do you know what you're doing? No, but I'm trying. That goes for both of us. They exchanged glances and laughed once again. Later, Andrew showed up with a cardboard box. This came for you. No sender, but I think you'll want to see it. Inside the box was only a black envelope, and inside the envelope, a photo. Emily recognized it immediately. It was a photo of her, still on the streets, sitting in an alley with Bentley before the accident, and on the back, a handwritten note, "Truths always find a way to surface." A chill ran down Emily's spine. Brian took the envelope from her hands and read it. "Natalie, what do we do?" He took a deep breath. "Nothing." "How come? We don't give her the power to control anything anymore. What if she goes to the press with this? Then, let her come. We have nothing left to hide." Emily nodded, but something strange began to grow in her chest. The storm may have passed, but maybe the biggest test of all was yet to come. The photo stayed on the living room table for hours. Emily walked by it countless times, as if ignoring it could make it disappear. But the image was too clear. Her, sitting in an alley, thin, exhausted, with Bentley wrapped in a torn blanket on her lap. And the phrase on the back burned like a warning: "Truths always find a way to surface." Brian tried not to push, but she knew he was paying attention, more than ever. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked while they ate in silence that night. Emily took a few seconds before answering. "Not now, but tomorrow." Brian nodded, and kept his promise not to press. The next morning, Emily woke up before the sun. She quietly changed clothes, took the note she had written by hand, and left it on the pillow. It wasn't an escape. It was just a need for clarity. She left alone. She walked for several blocks until she reached the subway station. Her destination, Maggie's house, the woman who had recognized her in the square. The only person, years ago, who had quietly extended a hand when everything had fallen apart. Maggie greeted her with a sweet smile and a long hug. "I thought you wouldn't come back." "I needed to think." "And now?" Emily looked around. The house was modest, but full of memories. Old photos, porcelain cups, hand-embroidered pillows. "I want to face this, everything, for the first time. Are you ready?" Emily took a deep breath. "I am." By late morning, she called Brian. "I need to show you something, and tell you everything, but I need you to come here, alone." Brian didn't hesitate. Less than half an hour later, he was knocking on Maggie's door. Emily was waiting for him, her eyes calm, and a brown envelope in her hands. "What is this?" "It's what's left of the documents from the NGO my father used to launder money, with my forged signature." She handed it to him, and Brian slowly opened it. Photos, receipts, copies of transfers, manipulated reports. "Maggie kept all this? She tried to protect me back then, but she was threatened and kept silent. Now she wants to make things right." Brian looked at Maggie with respect. "Thank you." She smiled humbly. "I just did what I should have done before." Emily turned her gaze back to Brian. "Now you know everything. There's nothing hidden anymore." He held her hand tightly. "And none of that changes who you are now. It just confirms the courage you've always had." Her eyes filled with tears. "Do you still want to stay by my side?" "I didn't leave by accident, and I won't stay out of convenience. I stay because I want to, because I choose to. She lowered her gaze, moved. For the first time in years she felt light. Then it's time to go back, he said, pulling her close, because we have one more truth to show the world. In the afternoon, Brian called a surprise press conference at the company's headquarters. The room was full of journalists, cameras, and curious onlookers. Emily stayed by his side the whole time, silent. Brian stepped onto the stage with an envelope in his hands. I'm here today to protect something more important than any contract. The truth. There were murmurs. Cameras adjusted. In the past few days, rumors have circulated about my wife, he looked at her firmly, and her past. Rumors planted, manipulated, and distorted by people who refuse to accept that change and overcoming challenges are real. He raised the envelope. This material contains proof that Emily was a victim of a scam, that her name was used by someone who should have protected her, and yet she faced life with dignity, never seeking revenge. A buzz filled the room. And if she's by my side today, it's because I chose to stand by someone who has more character than many who know palaces, but don't know what home is. Emily felt tears stream down her face. The press applauded. But more than that, she saw something in the faces of the people there. Respect. That night, back at the mansion, Helen placed a cake on the table with a handwritten note. Congratulations for defeating the past with the truth. Now, just admit the rest. Helen. Emily laughed, wiping away her tears. She's smart. Smarter than all of us put together. They sat at the table, side by side, not saying much. Sometimes silence was more valuable than words. Then Brian turned to her. The contract ends in a few days. I know. And us? Emily took a deep breath. I don't know what to say. Then let me say it first, he held her hand. I don't want this to end. I don't want you to leave. I don't want to pretend anymore that what we have is temporary. She looked at him. So what do you want? I want to try, for real. No clauses, no deadlines, no letterhead. She smiled, tears in her eyes. Me too. Is that a yes? That's a come with me. Brian pulled her into a hug, and they stayed there for a long time, embraced, feeling that, at last, what had been improvised had become a choice. Outside, Andrew and Helen were watching from the kitchen window. So? Andrew asked, sipping his coffee. I bet they'd confess before the contract ended. I won, Helen said triumphantly. And what did you bet? You'll wash the dishes for the whole week. Andrew grumbled. I knew this romance was going to cause me trouble, Helen laughed. Totally worth every dirty dish. Later in the bedroom, Emily looked out the window as the moonlight softly entered. Brian approached from behind and hugged her. Can I tell you something? Of course. For the first time, I feel whole. She smiled, still looking at the stars. I do too. And I don't want this to be the end of anything. Me neither. Brian kissed the top of her head. Then let's make the next chapter, the beginning of everything. It was as if time had stopped. Since the press conference where Brian revealed the truth to the world, the days passed by quietly and peacefully, as if the universe had finally decided to give the couple a break, who had lived for so long between mistrust and scars. Emily woke up every day with a calmer heart. Not because everything was solved, but because now she knew she didn't have to run away anymore. She didn't need to hide. And, most importantly, she didn't need to pretend. Brian had also changed. It was visible. His steps were less hurried. His eyes, which used to be so cold and calculating, now lit up when they met hers in the morning. He had allowed himself to be someone other than the CEO. And that, to Emily, was the greatest sign of love he could offer. The contract between them had expired 2 days ago. But neither of them mentioned it. Neither of them felt the need to bring it up. Because when something stops being an agreement and becomes a choice, it no longer needs to be discussed. It just needs to be lived. That afternoon, Emily received a note. It was on the pillow of the chair where she liked to read. Today, at 7 p.m., meet me in the sunroom. Wear something that makes you feel like yourself, B. Emily read it 3 times, her heart racing with each read. Helen showed up minutes later with a dress in her hands. A soft blue, light, with a flowy fit that seemed to float on the body. He asked me to leave this for you. Did he pick it? He just said, something that matches her. And I'm an expert at that, Helen replied, winking. Emily smiled, feeling butterflies in her stomach. She had no idea what Brian was planning, but something inside her told her that tonight would change everything. At 6:59 p.m., she went downstairs. Helen and Andrew were waiting for her in the hall. "He's out there." "Go," said Helen, adjusting a loose strand of her hair with a motherly smile. "You look beautiful, Emily," added Andrew, visibly emotional. She took a deep breath and went. The sunroom had been transformed. Small lights hung from the trees like stars. Petals were scattered across the floor. A soft piano tune played in the background, and in the center, a circle of candles formed a path to Brian. He was there, standing, wearing a dark suit, but with the most open and sincere eyes she had ever seen. Emily walked slowly toward him. "Brian, shh. Wait, let me speak." She nodded, swallowing hard. "When you came into my life, everything I knew was turned upside down. You messed up my routine, my control, my logic, and I fell in love with that." Emily felt tears welling up. "I fell in love with your courage, with the way you see the world, even after so much pain. I fell in love with every no you gave me, with every silence full of meaning. I fell in love with the way you take care of Bentley, and most of all, with the way you taught me to take care of myself." He took a deep breath, pulled out a small box from his pocket, and kneeled. "I don't want to live calculated days anymore, or relationships with expiration dates. I want the unpredictable. I want the silly arguments, the bad coffee, the awkward jokes. I want you, Emily." She brought her hands to her mouth, already crying. "Will you marry me?" Emily dropped to her knees in front of him and hugged him tightly. "Of course I will. I've wanted to for a long time, even before I knew I wanted to." He laughed, emotional, and slid the ring on her finger. A simple ring, with a small stone in the center, but with a sparkle that seemed to hold everything they had lived through. "So it's official," she said through tears. "Now it's for real." "It always has been," he replied before kissing her. The wedding happened 3 weeks later, simple, intimate, perfect. The ceremony took place in the mansion's garden at sunset, with lights hanging and white chairs. Helen organized everything masterfully, and Andrew, emotional, was responsible for bringing the rings, with Bentley trotting beside him wearing a tiny tuxedo. Emily entered in a light dress, her hair loose, and a smile so genuine that even the sky seemed to stop to watch her pass. Brian waited for her at the altar, his eyes full of emotion, wearing the same suit from the night of the proposal, because, according to him, that suit had brought him luck. The vows were spontaneous, sincere. "You saved me," said Emily. "Not from the street, not from the past, but for myself. You reminded me that I could still be loved." "And you healed me," Brian replied. "You showed me there's life beyond control, and that love is losing the fear of falling." They got married to applause, tears, and smiles, and the kiss at the altar was everything a fairy tale ending should be: long, emotional, and full of unspoken promises. At the party, Helen gave a speech that brought both laughs and tears. "I never imagined I'd see this man in love. But if there's anyone who could melt his ice, it's this woman with a hurricane soul." Andrew added, "And if I had known that a run-over dog would bring all this, I would have bought another just to do it again." Everyone laughed. Even Bentley barked at just the right moment. Later, away from prying eyes, Emily and Brian sat on the garden swing, still in their wedding clothes, barefoot, their hands intertwined. "And now?" she asked, eyes closed. "Now, we live. Together. Always. Even when I'm mad. Especially when you're mad, and when the world tries to bring us down, we hold on tight, like now." Emily rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the night breeze brush against her skin. "I like the sound of that. I liked you a lot more." They laughed, and that night, with the scent of flowers and the distant sound of music, Emily was certain of something she never dared to believe. She hadn't just been saved, she had been chosen. And even more importantly, she had chosen too. What did you think of Emily and Brian's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what rating would you give this story? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to follow all our stories, and feel free to check out more touching stories by clicking here on the final screen.